Hi, you are watching Hiring for Executives webinar series part 3 on a topic of Are reference checks more important than the interview? Reference checks are the fifth step of the hiring process. The best practice hiring process starts with defining the role. Without a good role description, it's really hard to know who you are looking for. 2. Sourcing means compiling a long list of the potential candidates who seem to match the role description. And 3. Screening is about finding out who might be even interested in being a candidate. Now you have a short list of people who are interested in being interviewed. 4. Interviewing helps you to understand if the candidate has all the necessary requirements and competencies to be successful in this role. And 5th, during reference check calls, you try to find out if what the candidate was saying is true. After reference checks, there's only left to make a hiring decision and onboard the new hire successfully. Our main speaker today is Tõnis Arro. He has been headhunter for more than 30 years. Tõnis has established several companies in the professional services sector. 5 years ago, he co-founded people analytics company Visnio, the SaaS platform that helps managers of all levels to make better hiring decisions. Before starting the lecture, let's watch one video to get your mind thinking about the reference checks. Listen carefully and write down. What do you think of the situation in the video? What is the manager doing right or wrong? You can pause this video to look for paper and pen to take notes. You can later compare your thoughts to the webinar participants' comments.
I'm considering hiring this person as my deputy. What do you think? Would you recommend him? Yeah, okay. What is your rating from 1 to 10? What would you say his strengths are? And weaknesses? Oh. Okay. Thanks. I asked 5 people. No one gave him a 10. I don't think this is the guy for me. And then, one of the guys said he was sometimes arrogant and angry. I will not employ him.
Ott noticed that, there was this 1 to 10 rating. Yes, I agree. Ott said that he's not a great fan of the ratings. Me neither. And they might have some role, but in no case the role can be declining anyone based on this rating. Can be an opening of a discussion, maybe like asking, okay, you said it's 8 or 9, what would make it 10 or something? This kind of thing might make sense, but declining someone because it wasn't a 10, this is nonsense, of course.
You're also, like Daniel said, for example, that seems like the executive is asking meaningless questions. So in general, not only the rating, but also other questions seem to be not really good.
Yeah. He asked if you recommend, he asked for the rating, he asked for strengths and weaknesses. None of these is reasonable question, actually.
Yeah, Chris is mentioning that also asking like yes or no questions doesn't help. Like, would you recommend him? So as I understand, Chris is saying that you should have like more insights into those answers, not just yes or no. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't understand this recommendation thing at all. That he said that, well, I'm considering hiring as him, the person as my deputy. But do recommend? How can the person recommend if he doesn't know anything else about the role? Or I don't know. Usually you would assume that he doesn't know the executive as well. So what does it mean to being his deputy?
Yes, Maria is adding that before the reference check, you have to prepare the questions regarding to the position and competences needed for this role. These questions were meaningless.
Yeah, I agree. This is exactly the right thing. So many people think that reference checks are not very useful because you actually don't get new information. You just can confirm that your candidate was a good one, and some people say that, well, you never find out anything about red flags with the candidate because you usually call to people the candidate has introduced you, and they wouldn't mention anyone who would be critical about them. So they are recommending to talk to people who would say that this is a great candidate. And more or less, I can agree. This is a usual practice that people either don't do this reference checks at all, or when they do it, they might do it superficial way, like this executive in this video, or they might delegate doing the reference checking to someone else. So when this someone else might not be well prepared as well to reference checking. And then it happens that the references are checked, but the report is not very meaningful, and so the executive maybe doesn't read it at all, and so on and so on. So there is lots of problems with reference checking. And then there are other people who actually say that that reference checks are really, really good, that they are actually better than interviews. And some people also even say that you can skip the interviews, but you do the reference checks and do many of them, and you can make your hiring decision based on these. So there are really two sides and two kinds of opinions here. Let's check our participants today. Let's do a quiz and see what you think.
Okay, so I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. So what do you think about this?
Say that it's no. Yeah.
Yes.
There is one person who argues this, that reference checks are better, and says that he would actually do without interviews if he had a choice. And this person is not just someone, he's very well-known entrepreneur and manager. He's the founder of LinkedIn and co-founder of PayPal. Let's see what he says about this thing.
In order to emphasize to you the importance of reference checking, if I had to pick between reference checking and interviewing, I would pick reference checking, right? I have actually made calls to candidates before when I'm hiring and said, I've actually already done the references and I would offer you a job. Would you come in and talk to me, right? Because, so for example, a technique that I will frequently do when I'm trying to evaluate for an important position is I'll see if I know 3 to 5 people that would know this candidate, and I'd send them an email saying, hey, I'm thinking about whether or not I should reach out to this person for this job. Give me a number from 1 to 10 on the person. Now, what I'm usually expecting as the negative reference is like a 7 or 7.5, which is I don't want to put something in an email that seems like I'm actually in fact saying this person's not good for it, because who knows where the email ends up. But I'll say something, and that's of course that's a negative. An 8 or a 9 is positive. Part of the reason why you do it for a number of people, because you kind of see what the blend is. A 10 or lower than a 7 will usually get a detailed response from me, because a 10 will be like, oh, you really think this is the best person in the world for this? Or one of the 2 or 3, right? As a way of kind of checking, and sometimes that's the answer, in which case you may move very fast. And if the person writes a 2 or 3, and look, if they're a close friend of mine, or they know that I would never forward this to anyone, because of course I wouldn't, then of course I understand that's the, oh God, radioactive, stay away. And And that will guide even before I start interviewing. And in referencing, what you want to do is, if you haven't gotten to a negative reference on anyone in the world, you really haven't referenced enough. Sometimes you kind of say, look, I have enough good references that it's fine. Like, I'm sure there's a negative reference I can find my way to, but like, even finding, unless I found out that they were an axe murderer or something, the overall balance of referencing is good enough that it's just like the expense of finding the negative reference is challenging. Everybody has a negative reference, right? And so, and sometimes you go, oh, right, that negative reference, like this person is really, really focused on intense process. Well, tense process, 6-person company, et cetera, that's a problem. Intense process, you're now scaling an operations center that really needs to never go down. Oh, actually, that could be a very good fit, right? So those are the kinds of things that you're doing, and referencing, like literally, lots of people say, oh, I reference, and they don't. Because they'll say, oh, Matt, who are the people I should call to let me know about you? Okay. And if Matt can't provide 1 or 2 people who would say good things, of course that's a negative tell. But most people can do that.
Okay, there was quite many interesting things here. So obviously, this manager in this video had heard about this 1 to 10 thing, but he had got it all wrong. First, as you noticed, or please notice what Reid Hoffman was telling about how he uses this 1 to 10 thing. It's for facilitating the discussion. So if someone puts 7, which he considers like a negative reference, then he would ask, what does it mean? And he wouldn't make the decision when, well, hey, no one gave a 10, so I have to decline this candidate. This is nonsense. You can just be sure that most people won't rate anyone as 10. So this was one of the important points here. The second important point is that he was calling to people he knew well. So you would assume that they would know this Reid Hoffman well as well. So you call to a friend more or less, and you can discuss with them. In most cases, in checking the references, this is not the case. You're calling to another executive who doesn't know you, and doesn't know the job. So let's go forward with my presentation. Now the truth. That's what I think. I think that reference checks are useful and you should do them always, but they can also be harmful if done incorrectly. And you saw a bad example. If you decline someone based on not enough information, this is a bad decision, of course. And you could also ask superficial questions and say, well, this is my guy, and make the hiring decision, which is not a good decision. So what are the 2 objectives of the reference checks? First, you have to validate the information, what you have got, because everybody lies, and this includes also the candidates, and not only low level, this is not exceptional. Also, high-level candidates lie a lot. I had a CEO candidate once who said that he had worked as a marketing manager of a region, but when I made the reference check, it appeared that he was a marketing trainee without any real responsibility. Then recently we had a case with a candidate from China, also to an executive C-level position, and my client or our client liked him very much, and we had to hold them back, not to sign the contract and not to start the employment relationship before we have completed the reference checks. And we did it with a partner in China, And it appeared that the candidate had lied everything. He hadn't even visited the schools he said he had graduated from, for example. But the contract he was supposed to, and our client was ready to sign, was that he would have 100,000 compensation if he is fired within a year for any reasons. So he was already ready to board the plane to pick up his 100,000 compensation. So the main thing you have to consider is that you are calling for information, not for opinions. And the information you ask is first about what this person did, what were the objectives, and what were the results. This is the main basic things you have to ask. And this is something the person you are calling to is well aware of. You are not, and this is information you need to make your hiring decision. You might also be interested in why the candidate you want to employ now, why did he leave? You better find out some concrete things, not that that it was on mutual consent. So anything happened, why did you agree so that it's better for this person to leave? And then there are some opinions. The most important are the facts, but there are some opinions you are also interested in. And first, you want to find about the red flags, you want to find the weaknesses, but when asking about strengths and weaknesses, you get a very formal answer, and usual part of it is that I can't recall any weaknesses or any issues or any problems with the candidate. It's a nonsense question, the weaknesses question. Also on a job interview, but also in this reference call. But then if you ask it on the other, a little bit differently, like the first question here, is there something you think the candidate might have benefited from improving in his performance or qualities? This is something where you might get a good answer. And the most important question is the middle one here. Would you employ this person again, or would you work with them again? And in what capacity and in what role? Sometimes the person you're calling might say that, well, I would like to work with him, but not in this role we were working with. So then you can get really very informative answer if they specify what the role should be, what is suitable to this person. And also sometimes you get to some interesting recommendations. If you ask, what would you recommend me if I'm going to employ him or anyone else who would be the employer? So these are the opinions worth asking. Some bad questions, which I don't recommend to ask, I have already mentioned the strengths and weaknesses. This is a nonsense question. So also, what kind of manager, what kind of leader, what is the work ethics, how would you rate the candidate from 1 to 10? All this is more or less nonsense. We already touched the last one, that maybe as a conversation facilitator, it might make sense, but you can't take on face value anyone's opinion who's in a scale you are not aware of. So the final thoughts, how many references you should take? The typical amount is 2 or 3. And there is some indication or some research saying that if you do more, it's better. But then we talk about 4 usually. So it might be that if you do more than 3 or do 4 or 5, it might be more, more validity or more predictive value. So now who is going to make it? Of course, I would prefer and I would recommend that the hiring manager makes these calls. But even more important is that these calls have to be done properly, and the questions asked must be the right ones. If the hiring manager does it the way like we saw in this video, this is not good. And we have already touched this, that are you allowed to talk to someone else than these people whom the candidate has introduced. I would strongly recommend to talk other people as well. And if you feel better, or if you feel that in your country this is required, ask your candidate's permission for this. But this is something you get. You might get much more interesting information about if you call someone whom that person hasn't really recommended to. This is Ben Horowitz recommends this, that he calls these backdoor references. So it's the front door references is talking to people whom the candidate recommends you or introduces, but then the backdoor reference is that you just check whom you know, who might know this person, and talk to them. There is only one rule, of course: you never should talk to the current employer, unless the candidate has explicitly said that this is okay. In some cases, it might happen that they have so good relationship with their boss that the boss is aware that the candidate is considering moving or leaving.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me more about his results? What did he achieve? Mm-hmm. Okay, can you recall if there was anything you thought might have been better in his work? Results, ethics? Mm-hmm. Okay. Any development areas? Can you think of one or two things that he might have been benefited from learning, or qualities that you might have recommend him to develop? Okay. How would you describe him as a team leader? Mm-hmm. Okay, what about the team members? What would they say about him? Mm-hmm. Okay, these issues, the conflict that you mentioned, was this a rare occasion or a pattern, perhaps? Uh-huh. Would you employ him again if you would need a person with his competences and experience? I see. Mm-hmm.
So I would mention one thing, which you probably noticed yourself as well, that this manager now used every occasion to ask additional questions. So you never say that, okay, yes. So you just get the answer, and then you ask a specific comment about something what the person you are talking to has mentioned. Like there was this conflict. Was it a pattern, or was it just one occasion?
But okay, let's go to our last part, an example. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna actually fill in the requirements parts. So let's bring an example that we just had an interview. If you watched the previous webinars, this is the position that we've been using through all of the webinars. So for let's say in here, we have a requirement, a proven ability to drive customer acquisition through marketing. And we had the interview, and here's, what I wrote down, that she has a lot of experience on increasing the brand awareness and she explained in detail how she did email marketing, had good results at getting people to join email lists, good conversation rates, and etc. Not much experience in online marketing like ads and AdWords. Okay, so what would be something that we could ask here, Dennis?
So more or less, what you see on the screen are the questions for interviewing the candidates, and are then the comments of Mirel, who interviewed the candidate. So now when you prepare for this reference check, you should just look at this information, what you have in this evaluation sheet, and decide what is the information you are missing. So maybe you might ask something like this, like, what can you say about this candidate's ability to drive customer acquisition through marketing? So can you tell me something about this? And that's it. So more or less the same kind of question you would ask from the candidates, you would now ask from the person who this candidate was reporting to. Or then some specifics which you want. But the main thing is that for specific questions, you have to look very carefully to the evaluation results, what you have about this candidate, and make your mind what, in addition to this information, what this candidate has given to you, you want to get from their superior.
Okay, so let's say I don't know, let's say I didn't listen, and now I would like to hear, like, because the comment says that, you know, the candidate first said that the team was really like independent, that they didn't have like this kind of structure of hierarchy of team manager and, you know, the team members. But when we asked about the managerial experience, then the candidates suddenly started like very vaguely explaining how she was actually the manager and how she managed the team. So what could I ask here? I think it's not good to ask, like, what do you think if she is a good manager?
No,
it's
not
a good.
You might have asked something like, can you describe what kind of relationship he had with the team, and or do you know about the team he was managing? How was this situation there? Anything like which helps you to clarify this confusion, what you describe here.
Okay, so here we have ensuring accountability, and just to explain, Visnio, its candidates like make their Visnio account, and then they take a series of tests, and this is of course based on self-evaluation, the competencies part. But here we can see that the person herself already evaluated themselves very low in ensuring accountability.
Yeah, but the main thing is that the candidate's self-evaluation of their competencies is not so important. Important is what you as a hiring manager decide about this competency, and what their previous managers thought about the competencies. So you might want to ask the same type of behavioral interview question about competencies, the same type of question what you asked from the candidates themselves. So for example, the second question here. So do you know a situation where this candidate dealt with an underperforming team member? Do you know, are you aware of any of these situations? And then you listen what you hear, and you decide whether this rating, what you have given here, is good, or maybe you want to change it. So the same thing, like you basically ask the same question you asked the candidate, and you can maybe add your comments or change your rating based on this.
Okay, so as a summary,
the idea is that you ask concrete examples, not just ratings, but you ask concrete examples, and based on these examples, you make your own rating.
Okay, So as a summary, you need to have good position map, because this is like the guideline of what I want to know. This also guidelines the interview with the candidate. And after the interview, based on the position map you have and based on the comments you have made, you choose where you're lacking information, basically, and what you want to ask during the reference calls. And 2 to 3 reference calls were optimal. And did we cover how long one reference call usually is? Like how long is okay, basically, to keep people on the phone?
It's usually between 10 and 20 minutes, but of course, sometimes when the person you're calling is ready to talk more, you can spend some more time. But I usually ask for 10-15 minutes. Sometimes go over it, but well, it's a favor the person makes you, so you can't abuse the time. But sometimes they get excited and talk, so you maybe just be ready to talk more than 15 minutes sometimes. Stanley said here in the comments that, well, if you have very specific things you want to validate or know about the candidate, then the person you are calling might not be able to evaluate them correctly. Then you're calling the wrong person, I would say. You would only ask the questions you know that this person has enough information to answer. So if you're calling someone about something very technical they doesn't know, then this is the right question to ask.
So 2 like similar thoughts from Anna, one from Angela. Anna is saying the way is done in USA cannot be done in Europe to the GDPR rules and also to some labor codes in specific countries. You have to have the approval of the candidate to contact the people to check the referrals.
Yes and no. You can always check anything if the person gives you permission. I think you refer to the so-called full background check, which is much more common in US, but can be also done in Europe. You just have the person to sign that he is aware and is okay with this. The full background check might improve checking also all kind of state registers about punishments and all this. This can be done and is done also in Europe, but the requirements, what you have the person to sign are maybe more strict, but basics is the same. You have to have the permission of the candidate for this. But on the other hand, if let's assume that I want to employ Mirel and we have the interview and I ask that, may I do some references about you? Can you give me a few people I can call about you? And then I would just ask as well that is it okay if I talk about you maybe to someone else? And if Mirel says she's okay with this, then I am actually not doing anything wrong if I call someone whom I know and whom I know that he knows Mirel and ask about her. It makes more tricky, of course, and it's more tricky if I want to write something down in a report, and then I would be very careful with this. Most of the information which is interesting, which I gather in this kind of informal calls to someone, is something which I wouldn't write down and would not send in an email. But I can make my mind and make my decision based on these anyway.
And other thing that she was saying is to add all of this, the called person, so who you're calling for the reference check, might be very cautious to share anything non-positive, as this might even be against made agreements or even local labor law. Or just, it's like maybe you don't want to say even anything bad. So what are you going to do in this situation if you see that?
This is the basic situation actually, which is the baseline you have to consider, that anyone you call have several reasons not to reveal any negative information. So you have to be clever to get to this negative information, and you be kind of have to be clever to read behind the lines here. That is, for example, the simple reason for the executive, if he has hired this person and he doesn't want to say anything bad, because it would say that you hired the wrong person. And the other thing might be that they might have had an agreement that, well, we don't talk anything bad about each other. And these two things are like very usually in place. There is also, Stanley has mentioned that how many specifics can you ask? So the KPIs might be confidential, for example. Yeah, of course. It's nice if you say that, well, I'm not asking anything confidential, but just can you give me a little bit more information about this? Or maybe if the KPIs were confidential, then they would say no. You can anyway ask. It's no problem.
Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, you can contact us at support@visnio.com.